Hi, and welcome to Creepy Crime Story, where the darkest truths aren't imagined, they're real. We open in a quiet South Jersey shore town where routine collapses into procedure. Linwood, New Jersey, May 10th, 2012, late morning. Inside a home on Woodstock Drive, a caretaker's concern turns into a call for help. Dispatch logs anchor the moment, a 911 report just after 11:30 a.m. Patrol and EMS are on scene within minutes. First responders work the way they're trained to when facts are thin and time matters. The house is cleared, a single upstairs bedroom isolated. Medics confirm death. Officers freeze the room and start the entry log. Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office is notified. The scene is treated as a homicide from the first hour. The victim is identified as April Kaufman, a local radio host and veterans advocate well known on the South Jersey airwaves. Notifications to family begin through the proper channels. What investigators note first are the absences. No door frames splintered, no windows forced, no casing glinting on the carpet, nothing obviously stolen. The bed, furniture, and surfaces are documented before any item is touched. Photographs and video build a baseline record. Measurements fix the position of the body and major objects. Evidence text dust high-touch areas, then pause when the initial latent print passes don't yield a usable ridge. That lack is recorded, not assumed. In methodical work, a no can be data. Outside, a perimeter keeps neighbors back from the driveway. This is 2012, and the block doesn't bristle with doorbell cameras yet. A limited canvas starts anyway. Who was home? Who left for work? What vehicles moved? Officers capture quick, clean statements about routine. Lawn crews scheduled, deliveries, school hours. The point isn't drama, it's time. If an intruder forced nothing and stole nothing, access and opportunity move to the front of the line. And inside, a senior investigator narrates the flow for the team. Fix the clock, lock the room, control the air. That means minimal personnel in the primary space, shoe covers on, no radios blaring, no unnecessary movement. A running log notes every entry and exit. The first hour priority is to preserve what can't be regrown. Powder trace if present, fibers, minute tool impressions on latches or sills, and any projectile or fragments secured in place pending the medical examiner's authority. Negative evidence sharpens the outline. No earlier emergency calls from the residents before the caretaker's 911. No signs of a struggle in common areas. No house-wide ransacking. The lack of forced entry doesn't answer who or why. It frames the next questions. Was there an unlocked ingress? Was the assailant known to the victim? Or did someone exploit a brief, quiet window when the home was accessible? Those questions are parked for later chapters. Today is about the clock, the room, and the record. As the first hour closes, transport coordination begins under seal. The homicide isn't solved at a threshold, it's built in layers. In towns like this, murders aren't just crimes. They pull at the fabric of a quiet community. The work ahead will be clinical, chain of custody, autopsy, and a reconstruction that treats every absence as a lead. The body now becomes its own scene, and the evidence leaves the house for the medical examiner. The work moves from a locked bedroom to a locked lab. Transport is arranged under seal with a documented chain from the residence to the Southern Regional Medical Examiner's office in Woodbine, New Jersey. Evidence numbers are assigned before the stretcher leaves the driveway. The receiving team signs custody forms on arrival, then photographs the exterior of each sealed bag before anything is opened. This isn't ceremony. It's the only way every later conclusion can survive court. Intake begins with the standard external survey. Clothing is cut away over clean paper to capture trace. Each garment is dried if needed, paper bagged, labeled, and placed in a secure locker. Fingernails are clipped and bagged separately. Buccal swabs are taken for DNA reference. Hands are tested for potential residue consistent with a close-range firearm discharge. The kit is logged, not interpreted at the table. Jewelry, if present, is photographed in situ and then inventoried with a witness signature. Nothing moves without a second set of eyes. The preliminary exam is methodical and limited to facts the camera can corroborate. The decedent is an adult female with no obvious defensive wounds on the hands or forearms. There are multiple gunshot wounds. The examiner measures each entrance, records its position with a metric scale, and notes the presence or absence of soot or stippling when visible. That language matters. It describes, it does not speculate. Range estimation will wait for lab review and the full report. Only after the external survey is complete does the team proceed to the internal exam. Trajectories are probed with flexible rods and photographed. When a projectile or fragment is located, it is recovered with non-metallic forceps, placed in a clean container, labeled, and sealed with initials and time. Those metal pieces are not bullets for television purposes. They are potential class characteristics for the firearms lab. Caliber group, rifling impressions, number of lands and grooves, direction of twist. If a match ever comes, it will come from how disciplined this moment is. Time of death estimation is conservative. The condition of the body at discovery, ambient temperature, and early post-mortem changes support a window consistent with the late morning response. That's as far as the morgue can responsibly go. The team avoids narrow claims because narrow claims fail when challenged. The legal standard is reasonable degree of medical certainty, not narrative neatness. Toxicology samples are drawn, blood, vitreous, urine when available, and labeled for the state lab. The purpose is not to imply impairment by the victim. It is to close a question that will otherwise linger unhelpfully. Anything detected later will be contextualized by medical history and prescription records. If nothing is detected, that is still evidence. It helps rule out explanatory noise. By the end of the autopsy day, the two most important lines are ready. Preliminary, multiple gunshot wounds. Confirmed, manner of death, homicide by firearm. Cause and manner are not the same. Cause tells you what happened. Manner tells you how it happened in legal categories: natural, accident, suicide, homicide, undetermined. Homicide here is a medical classification, not a criminal charge. The difference avoids confusion later when prosecutors use the word in a courtroom. Everything removed from the body heads back to the lead detective under seal: clothing, projectiles or fragments, swabs, and the initial autopsy documentation. A copy of the chain of custody packet travels with the evidence. The original stays with the medical examiner. The morgue's job is to produce clean facts and preserve what might be tested again years later. It is not the place to assign motive or theory. For viewers trying to understand why the morgue chapter matters, this is the reason. It fixes the bedrock. If a weapon is ever recovered, those recovered fragments make or break the linkage through class and possibly individual characteristics. If a witness later describes the number of shots, the wound count either supports or contradicts them. If a defense argues contamination, the sealed custody trail either holds or fails. Everything downstream relies on what happens here being boring, exact, and repeatable. There is a human dimension that belongs in a true account but stays within boundaries. A person with a public role is now the center of a homicide. Families and communities will carry that fact long after the lights in the autopsy suite go dark. The investigators in that room know it. Still, the only honorable path forward is the same path every time. Verify, preserve, document, and return the record to the people whose job it is to build the rest of the case. With the medical facts set and evidence repackaged, the team notifies the lead that items are ready for pickup. The next task is a practical one. Take what the body has said and test it against what the house and the neighborhood did not say. No forced entry at the scene means access has to be modeled. Entry and exit have to be reconstructed. The projectiles, if they hold usable marks, will need a lab, and the timeline already anchored by dispatch will be checked again against what the phones were doing that morning. The investigation returns to Woodstock Drive to rebuild entry and egress with what the scene gave and what it refused to give. The return to Woodstock Drive is about mechanism. Investigators work room to door to perimeter, rebuilding how someone entered, moved, and left without obvious disruption. The locks are examined first. Strike plates and screws show no fresh bending or splintering. Hinges are intact. There are no pry marks on the jambs, no impressions consistent with a kick. Window frames are checked under oblique light. Paint is unbroken at latch edges. Weather stripping shows no recent compression inconsistent with normal use. Screens are seated square. It reads like access rather than force. High-touch surfaces are processed in a narrow sequence to preserve order. Exterior knob, interior knob, deadbolt thumb turn, door edge near the latch, then the primary light switch. Powder and gel lifters are applied, photographed in situ, and lifted with identifiers. Early results are limited. nothing with ridge details sufficient to individualize. That no hit is logged as working status, not an endpoint. DNA swabs follow on the same surfaces, plus the interface of the door near shoulder height and the frame just below the latch, places that often catch touch DNA when someone steadies themselves entering or leaving. Flooring is documented with a grid. A handful of partial footwear impressions in low-pile carpet near the threshold are photographed with a scale. The pattern lacks enough points to individualize, but suggests a common athletic outsole. That goes into the working file with a notation to cross-check against any shoes seized later under warrant. The path from threshold to the stairs is photographed in progression so movement can be argued later without guessing. In the bedroom, technicians revisit contact zones they deliberately skipped on day one to avoid overhandling: nightstand edges, room switch plates, closet pull, inner door handle. The bed rails and frame are swabbed along with the underside of the mattress lip where a hand might grab for leverage. Fibers collected from the bedding are preserved in paper packets. A handheld light sweeps corners for trace that wouldn't show under overheads. Anything fluorescing is noted and triaged for lab review without interpretive language in the field. The exit path matters as much as the entry. The staircase banister is processed top to bottom. Newels, often missed, are swabbed where a palm would catch the turn. At the base of the stairs, a narrow scuff on painted drywall sits at about hip height. It's photographed, measured, and a small paint flake is collected in case later comparisons are needed to a belt clip or holster rub on a seized item. These fragments are unglamorous, but they close loops later when testimony turns on details. Outside, the canvas focuses on sight lines. The block has fewer cameras than you'd see today. A neighbor's older DVR system covers its own driveway and a slice of street. Detectives recover the unit and create a verified copy on-site with hash values. Playback shows typical morning traffic, contractor vans, a school run, but no clear shot of a person approaching the target door. The time overlay is compared to dispatch stamps to confirm the DVR clock drift. An offset is recorded. Another home reports a non-functioning camera. Investigators still photograph its mounting to document that it cannot provide footage, preempting later claims about missing video. Mailboxes and delivery routes are checked to establish routine interruptions. Regular activity on the street helps narrow opportunity windows. When the lawn crew tends the corner lot, when a package truck typically passes, when school buses loop. Nothing fixes an intruder on camera, but routine acts as a metronome. The absence of force plus a narrow window points investigators toward access by opportunity or invitation. Vehicle processing is limited and targeted. Cars registered to the residents are photographed where they sit. Interior swabbed at handles, gear selector, and steering wheel. No claim is made about foreign prints or DNA at this stage. All samples are logged and sent. Tire tracks in the driveway are faint and consistent with current vehicles. There is no secondary tread impression to cast. If any visitor arrived by car and parked on the street, they did not leave a visible trace in front of the house that morning. Back at the door, one small detail gets a second look. The strike plate screws are short, half-inch wood screws that hold under routine use but fail under a true kick. Here, they are undisturbed. A forced entry should mark something: wood fibers, paint transfer, a warped latch. Those signatures aren't present. The absence, paired with an intact chain of first response and a conserved bedroom, keeps investigators on a simple track. Access without force is the likeliest model. That could be an unlocked door, a door briefly unlatched, a door opened by someone with routine access, or a door held for another. Each version generates its own interview list and warrant plan. The narrative for the audience is straightforward. When scenes are quiet, the work pivots to structure, timing, and what the house refuses to give. Fiber packets, touch swabs, and non-individualized footwear photos are not headline pieces, but they build a scaffold for the next move. The morgue established cause and manner. The house now suggests means. None of it names a person. It narrows the field in a way the law can stand on. The final step on this pass is paperwork. Every lift, swab, fiber packet, and DVR clone is logged, sealed, and queued for lab accession. Detectives draft the first reconstruction memo, a simple map from door to stairs to bedroom and back. It includes the current working propositions and excludes speculation. That memo will be refined later with phone records and interviews, but today it holds a single idea. Entry and exit happened without visible force during a limited window in a neighborhood with few cameras. The human note belongs here, quietly. This was a home where mornings once had a cadence. Coffee, a schedule, calls to make. Now every surface is a data point. In communities like this, murders aren't just crimes, they reset what home means for everyone who lives within sight of the tape. Precision is a form of respect. The handoff from scene work to signal work is immediate. Detectives use the dispatch time as the anchor and request historical call detail records from carriers for phones tied to the residents, close contacts, and known visitors. This is 2012. There is no app telemetry, no GPS harvest. The tools are limited but reliable, time-stamped call and text events and the cell site sectors that handled them. Subpoenas and preservation letters go out within hours. Custodians of records confirm account ownership, billing addresses, and the fields available. Call start time, duration, dialed or received, tower ID, and sector. Analysts build a clean ledger from midnight to early afternoon, paying attention to gaps, bursts, and handoffs. They do not guess at content. They measure behavior. The first pass maps the dark interval around the home before the caretaker's call. There are no earlier emergency calls from the residence line or the primary household mobile. Routine texts in the morning taper near late morning. That taper is not proof of presence or absence. It is a timing clue. In this kind of crime, the absence of usual noise often matters as much as the presence of something abnormal. Investigators next widen the ring. They identify numbers that consistently contact the household, work associates, medical office lines, friends, and compare those patterns to the same late morning window. A few lines show ordinary weekday activity with towers that place them miles away. One cluster shows limited activity but no anomaly. The point is not to invent drama, it is to exclude people politely and permanently. Clean exclusions protect the integrity of what comes later. Historical cell site analysis begins once the carrier delivers tower maps. Analysts overlay sector shape on a standard map and treat it honestly. Sectors are wedges, not precision dots. A phone that lights the sector covering Woodstock Drive might be in a home, a driveway, or a vehicle moving on a nearby street. That humility is important. Jurors respect it later. So do good defense attorneys. A short series of calls in the days leading up to May 10th stands out for a different reason. Timing bursts. The same small set of numbers lights up after business hours, then goes quiet, then repeats early on the day of the homicide. There is nothing illegal about after-hours calls. What matters is who holds those numbers and where those handsets tend to live when they are not in motion. Subpoenas convert those numbers into names and subscriber histories. Some resolve to postpaid accounts with stable billing. Others appear to be prepaid with minimal registration. That difference changes how investigators approach the next step, not what they claim today. Using the autopsy's conservative window and the scene's narrow entry without force model, analysts test whether any device with a known link to the household hits a sector that plausibly covers the house during the relevant minutes. One device shows routine morning movement away from Linwood. Another stays pinned to a sector that covers a medical corridor. A third is off or silent by records, no calls, no texts, then wakes up after the police response. Silence can be a red flag or a coincidence. It does not convict. It does, however, justify an interview. Carrier returns also provide IMEI and IMSI where available. That allows the team to see if a subscriber swapped SIMs around the time of the homicide. One handset shows the same IMEI, but different SIMs over a short span that week, common with prepaid plans. Analysts note it and move on. The discipline here is to collect friction points without overselling them. With historical records, honest limits are the difference between a clean inference and a broken one. To keep the workflow transparent, the team drafts a simple link chart: nodes for devices, lines for calls, dates on the lines, and no editorial arrows. The chart shows relationships. It does not declare conspiracies. Next to it sits the cell site overlay for the late morning window. When the two sheets are read together, a shape emerges. A few numbers orbit the household more closely in the days before the homicide than they did in prior weeks, and at least one device goes conspicuously quiet during the narrow entry window, then resumes afterward. Those are testable observations, not conclusions. Detectives also run pen register/trap and trace prospectively on select lines once court orders are approved. This is forward-looking and limited. If a target device suddenly begins contacting new numbers after the homicide, those numbers become interview candidates and, if necessary, warrant subjects. None of this replaces scene work. It targets it. When communities feel exposed by a violent event, the honest answer is that procedure, not speed, protects them best. Financial checks begin in parallel, but only for scope. Bank and credit activity for the household and a short list of associates show ordinary purchases, gas, groceries, routine billing, nothing that can be tied to the late morning with precision. On the other hand, phone purchases and activations sometimes surface when prepaid devices are used. Leads go to retailers to verify whether any flagged numbers originated from nearby stores in the weeks before May 10th. If a clerk remembers a face or a time frame, that becomes a separate path. If not, the paper is still worth the ink. It closes a lane. The digital ledger also serves a humane purpose. It stops rumor. When a grieving circle speculates, records can quietly absolve people who were nowhere near the home. That doesn't solve a homicide. It keeps ordinary lives from getting ground up by suspicion. In a quiet town, that restraint is part of the work. By the end of the digital sweep, the team has 3 deliverables ready for the next step. 1. A tower sector packet tied to the dispatch anchor and the autopsy window. 2. A link chart marking pre-incident bursts and post-incident activity. And 3. A short list of devices for interview and, if needed, handset seizures. No one is named on camera. The process moves forward because the record allows it to, not because a narrative wants it to. The final note is practical. Historical cell site doesn't say who pulled a trigger. It tells investigators where attention belongs. And when the attention is fair and documented, interviews in the next phase are cleaner, faster, and less likely to harm people who did nothing wrong. The next move is conversation under control, short, recorded, and measured against records. Detectives start with people who can explain routine without dramatics, the caretaker, nearby workers, and neighbors who keep regular hours. Each interview is time-boxed. Questions fix where someone was, what they saw, and whether they noticed anything unusual about doors, vehicles, or visitors. Answers are logged against the dispatch anchor and the cell site ledger built earlier. When a memory wanders, investigators gently bring it back to times, distances, and verifiable acts. In a serious crime, clarity protects both the innocent and the record. Household contacts come next. A spouse's workday, staff schedules, and any changes to morning patterns are documented with the same care as a scene photo. Statements about calls or texts are tested against call detail timestamps. Claims about errands or appointments are cross-checked with calendars and billing entries. Detectives use neutral language, help me reconcile this, rather than accusations. If an answer contradicts the ledger, the conflict is parked, not argued. The point is to keep the door open for follow-up when new documents arrive. Friends and colleagues describe recent stressors, health concerns, financial strain, and relationship friction. Investigators avoid conclusions and stay inside what witnesses personally observed. They flag only what can be tested. Who knew travel plans, who had unsupervised access to the home, who handled keys. One friend mentions a habit of leaving a door unlocked briefly during morning routines. That note is not proof. It's a lead that aligns with quiet hardware and undisturbed jams. A small circle with ties to motorcycle culture appears in multiple interviews. The references are vague at first: nicknames, patch nights, bike runs. Detectives record each alias and number, then ask for introductions rather than confrontations. Some contacts are protective. Others distance themselves quickly. The tone stays professional. People talk more when they understand that phones and towers already define the edges of possibility. Every statement that points to a time is tested. If someone says they called from work, the cell site should show a sector consistent with that location. If they say they drove across town after breakfast, bank cameras or a receipt should echo the trip. 2 accounts are too polished. Minute marks recalled with implausible precision for an ordinary day. An investigator notes, almost to himself, that the data aligned a little too cleanly. Neat stories often fray when the paper trail arrives. As the interviews progress, small inconsistencies stack. A contact who claims he was asleep during the late morning window is linked to a brief outgoing call near that time. Another insists on no recent contact with certain friends, yet his device exchanged short bursts with 2 of those numbers earlier in the week. None of this is a verdict. It's the start of a targeted list for re-interviews under Miranda advisements if the facts warrant it. Detectives also work the medical and advocacy circles around the victim, April Kaufman, to understand who might have felt exposed by her public life. These conversations are careful and humane. People grieving tend to fill silence with speculation. The interviewers redirect to what you saw and what you can show. When a rumor names a device, that device either appears in the CDRs or it doesn't. Procedure shields people from being tried in a living room. By week's end, two things are clear. First, the entry model, access without force during a tight window, fits the human side of the story. Several people had the knowledge or comfort to be near that door without making noise. Second, a handful of devices and names sit closer to the center of the ledger than chance would place them. That proximity doesn't prove an agreement, it just tells investigators where the next lawful pressure should be applied. The last step before moving forward is documentation. Detectives draft a clean memo that lays out each interview, the specific claim tested, the record used to test it, and the result. Corroborated, contradicted, or unresolved. They include a short addendum recommending warrants for new handset records and a limited number of targeted property searches. The memo avoids adjectives. It reads like what it is, a map to the next door that should be knocked on. There's a human truth that belongs here. In small towns, people hold each other's history. Good interview work respects that history while refusing to let it distort facts. It's how you keep a single homicide from wounding everyone it touches. With a narrowed device list and a quiet entry model, investigators pivot to how a homicide like this gets arranged and paid for. Financial workups start with the obvious: routine banking, cash habits, and any withdrawals that cluster before the homicide. Records show ordinary bill pay but also periods of increased cash flow incompatible with everyday expenses. Those draws, when placed against call detail timelines, sit near after-hours contact bursts already charted. The pattern isn't a confession, it's a map. Detectives request surveillance pulls where cash was obtained and verify teller logs. They also ask retailers for activation logs tied to prepaid phones that link, by number or time, to devices orbiting the household in the days before May 10th. Some stores return nothing. Others provide receipts and partial video that confirm purchases consistent with short-lived communication tools. Interviews from Chapter 5 now matter more. A small set of names overlaps with motorcycle social circles and a regional pill diversion economy. According to court filings and later trial testimony, prosecutors would allege a illicit script network routed through a medical practice generated cash and contacts, two ingredients that make a murder for hire feasible. The theory is straightforward and attributed. When relationships and litigation pressure mount, people with access to cash and to men willing to take risk can turn a grievance into a task. Investigators do not sell that theory to the public. They build support quietly with bank records, pharmacy audits, and handwriting comparisons on suspect prescriptions. Each document is logged, each chain signed. The means question stays practical. What would a contractor need? Access, a gun, and a timetable that avoids neighbors. The scene already suggests access without force. According to charging narratives later presented in court, an unlocked door, left that way briefly, was the planned method of entry. That allegation is recorded as theory, not as a discovery fact. On the tool side, the firearm was not recovered. That absence is common in contract killings. It shifts the evidentiary burden to ballistics fragments, trajectory analysis, and the reliability of cooperative witnesses who describe what was carried and how it was disposed. Money is cross-checked against testimony. A round figure, about $20,000, appears repeatedly in sworn statements years later. Detectives do not publish that number in 2012. They test the possibility by asking a simple accounting question. Could these clustered withdrawals plus off-books cash from diversion fund a murder team? If the math fails, the theory weakens. If it holds, the warrant stack grows. In this file, the math does not contradict the allegation. Planning also leaves residue in movement. Link charts show after-hours calls between a physician, intermediaries in a biker network, and phones with prepaid histories. Some of those contacts fall off abruptly after the homicide, then restart when police activity becomes public months and years later. One attempted meetup happens at a coffee shop with external cameras. Analysts pull the DVR, preserve with hash values, and document clock drift exactly as they did with the neighborhood footage. The quality is poor, but the timestamps line up with phone events. Weak video is still corroboration when it lands on the same minute marks as a time-stamped call. Multiple attempts enter the record. Cooperating witnesses will later describe aborted efforts before May 2012, including scheduling problems and failed handoffs. Investigators treat those claims cautiously until they can place a device, a car, or a receipt in the same window. Where the corroboration exists, the attempt is elevated. Where it doesn't, it is parked for court. The planning arc closes with warrants. Bankers' boxes fill with account statements, pharmacy logs, and business records from a medical office. The language inside the affidavits stays narrow. Probable cause to seize records that can confirm cash availability, communication links, and any steps taken to learn the victim's routine. In towns where grief travels faster than certainty, careful affidavits are part of public trust. The point is not volume, it's verifiability. With procurement patterns documented and intermediaries linked through both testimony and financial records, investigators move into the charging phase, where suspicions become structured allegations. The theory assembled by prosecutors is layered. At the top, Dr. James Kaufman is identified as the organizer, accused of arranging his wife April's murder to preserve control of an illicit prescription operation and to resolve domestic tension. Below him, Ferdinand Augello, a longtime associate in a motorcycle network, is alleged to have brokered the arrangement. At the execution level, Frank Mulholland, later deceased, is identified in charging documents as the triggerman. This hierarchy is not presented to the jury yet. It is mapped in internal memos, then translated into charging language. Interagency cooperation becomes essential. The Atlantic County Prosecutor's Office works with the FBI and DEA, both because of the controlled substance diversion allegations and the financial trails crossing state boundaries. Federal subpoenas help secure phone records faster than local requests could. Pharmacy audits require DEA sign-off, and suspicious activity reports from banks are pulled through federal databases. Each action is documented with chain of custody to preserve admissibility. Arrest warrants are drafted with narrow specificity. For Dr. Kaufman, the probable cause statement cites his financial withdrawals, communications with Augello, and the testimony of cooperating witnesses from the biker circle. For Augello, prosecutors emphasize call overlaps, his alleged role as broker, and corroborated statements pointing to his coordination with Mulholland. The triggerman cannot be tried. He died in 2013. But his role is locked into the narrative by multiple testimonies and corroborative data. Timing matters. Dr. Kaufman is not arrested immediately after April's death in 2012. Instead, investigators wait years, building a foundation strong enough to withstand suppression motions. His eventual arrest in 2017 follows not only the homicide inquiry, but also a separate investigation into the prescription drug ring. That overlap gives prosecutors leverage. They can tie motive and method together in a way that shows consistency rather than coincidence. Public announcements are staged carefully. The prosecutor's office emphasizes that this was not a random break-in, but a targeted crime linked to financial and domestic pressures. At the same time, they assure the public that interagency support means evidence integrity will hold in court. For the community, it is both relief and renewed grief. Relief that charges are filed, grief that it took years to reach this stage. The human element remains clear. Families of veterans April supported now see her name in headlines alongside drug trafficking and contract killing. Detectives recognize the need to present the case clinically, but also to acknowledge the loss of a woman who built her public identity around advocacy. In true crime reporting, facts must be sharp, but meaning cannot be erased. As the case advanced to court, prosecutors leaned on covert recordings made by Andrew Chef Glick, a cooperating Pagans member. Jurors were allowed to hear Augello speaking in coded terms, writing notes instead of names, and reacting to evidence tying him and Francis Mulholland to the killing. Before trial could begin, Dr. James Kaufman was found dead in his cell in January 2018, ruled a suicide. With him gone, focus shifted to Augello. In September 2018, a jury in Mays Landing heard weeks of testimony. Witnesses, phone logs, and Glick's recordings formed a consistent chain. By October 2018, Augello was convicted of murder and racketeering, sentenced to life in prison. Guilty, sentenced to life. April Kaufman's case closed not with a single courtroom confession, but through layered evidence, cooperative witnesses, and persistence, reminding us how organized crime can be dismantled piece by piece. Telling April Kaufman's story reminds me how fragile justice can be, and how determined voices must stay when crime is hidden behind power. What I take away, and what I hope you do too, is that silence allows corruption to grow, but persistence can uncover truth. In our own lives, standing up, speaking out, and protecting one another are the real shields against harm. So what about you? What lessons do you see in this case? If this story moved you, let me know in the comments where you're watching from or share your thoughts below. And if you'd like to follow more cases like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for the next true crime story.